So today we are continuing with Mishnah Parak 2, Mishnah 6. This is still Hillel speaking, and Hillel teaches us, hang on a second. Hillel teaches us the following. It says, Velo habayishon lamed. The person who is embarrassed will not learn. If a person is a bashful person, is not going to be able to learn. Velo hakapton malamed. And a person who is a kapton is someone who is either impatient or quick-tempered, someone who is just can't, everything has to be a certain way or else. That person is not going to be able to be a good teacher. So we have two angles, right? The student and the teacher. We all students and we're all teachers, really, in many ways. So the idea of the lo habaishan lamed, the person who is bashful, person who acts embarrassed, is not going to be able to learn. So there are a number of different angles to that. First one, Rashi quotes from a Gemara that tells us that if a person is going to be sitting quietly and not asking, and they don't want to ask about how to do something, whether it be a halacha or just in general, how to be able to accomplish things, you're not going to know anything. It's very, very difficult to know anything if you're not willing to ask. It's true, and you can go on YouTube, maybe find out a lot of things, but not it's if you can ask someone, it's certainly better, and you can have a back and forth. The idea of a kaptan, according to Rashi, the person who is impatient, is a teacher who is somebody asks him a question and he's getting upset. Like what, especially when you asked that question already, you're asking again, and you don't have patience with the student, and the student honestly doesn't understand and is trying to understand, and this teacher is saying, okay, you asked 3 times already, enough. And especially if he says it in a manner which is showing impatience, that person is going to not be a very good teacher. The student is not going to learn from him. Rabbeinu Yonah points out an interesting idea, which is that this character trait of being someone who is bashful, and not so much bashful, but you have a sense of embarrassment, that you can feel embarrassed if you're in a situation where something is embarrassing. So where something is not looking good for you. That's good in the general sense. When it comes to learning, that is not a good character trait, because again, you're not going to be able to learn if you're feeling embarrassed. And Rabbi Lau points out that normally we say that a person who is easily embarrassed, oh, that's a humble type of person. We look at that person as humble. However, in the case of the person who's learning, who's supposed to be trying to learn something, and you want to know something, why is that person not asking questions? The reason that person's not asking questions is because they're embarrassed that they're going to look like they don't know anything. Which is not really a sense of humility. That's a sense of arrogance, that if I ask a question and everyone's going to think my question was stupid, or everyone's going to say, how come that person didn't know that? Then everyone's going to look down on me. So really, that's a sense of arrogance on my part. I don't want everyone to look down on me. I don't want them to know that I don't know anything. And that is where it becomes a negative. Well, another angle of why someone might not ask is sometimes you might be embarrassed to ask, not so much because you're feeling like everyone's going to look down on me, but it's like, who am I to ask? We have all these other people who the teacher is such a big scholar, so he knows so much, and I don't know much, so like I feel funny asking from someone who is more knowledgeable, greater than me in that sense. It's one thing with someone who you happen to know more than me, but essentially I can look at you as my equal. Then I'm not so embarrassed. But if you're so much, I feel like, oh, you're too much above me for me to even ask you. That would be a deterrent, and a person should be able to get over that. Don't do that, because if you always act that way, you're always afraid to ask. How are you ever going to become smart? How are you going to gain wisdom? You're not going to be able to gain the wisdom if you're not willing to ask and to say, please explain it to me so that I can understand it. Flipping back to the teacher angle, that the teacher should be not just someone who doesn't get angry, but the teacher should be open-hearted, be able to answer whatever is being asked, even if you know that the other person is going to have a tough time understanding. Be patient, repeat it again, repeat it again, repeat it again. And an ideal, a good teacher really, when they give the answer, they don't repeat it in the exact same words that they said before, because that's what you told him before and he didn't understand it. So you repeat the answer in a slightly different way of explaining it so that the person will hopefully understand it this time. The Gemara brings down that Rav Preda he had a student who it took him 400 times. He had to explain it to him for him to understand something. And whatever it was, for whatever reason, every time it was 400 times. And he had the patience to be able to explain it to the student 400 times, if you can imagine. And then one day, the Rav Preda had to do something after the class. And I guess he told the students, I'm going to be in a rush when I leave, so I'm not going to be able to stick around after the class. I have to go do something. And he taught them the 400 times again, and he still didn't understand it. And he said, like, what happened? He said, because in my mind, I was afraid you were in a rush to leave, so I wasn't able to concentrate. So he taught it to him again and again and again. So, a teacher with that kind of patience is the ideal. Another, the Bartanura points out similar idea that the person who's embarrassed to ask because he's embarrassed to ask because people are going to make fun of him. So that person is always going to remain with his questions. He's always going to remain with his doubts. He's not going to be able to solve his issues. Also, the Pharisee Yisrael points out that if a person is when you're asking a question, you're afraid that it's going to look negatively upon you. So then the people are going to think, oh, you don't know anything. You know what? You're going to end up remaining a person like that. And therefore, it's essential that we overcome our inhibitions, if you will, and not to be embarrassed when we ask. And there are people, by the way, who we know who ask nonstop because they really want to know, and those are the people who ultimately succeed. I saw that brought down that I forgot who it was that was looking at it, but the Steipler Gaon, Rabbi Yaakov Kanievsky, who when he was a student in Europe, so someone had gone into the yeshiva there and wanted to point out like who were the different people who were like the best students, and they pointed to different people, and he said about the Rosh Yeshiva said about him, Rabbi Yaakov Kanievsky, that he was the best seeker, meaning he was the person who he wasn't necessarily the most brilliant, and but he was the one who really wanted to know. He would ask and make sure that he got the answer. And he turned out to be one of the greatest sages of our, not the previous generation. And so, it's that characteristic of being able to ask and make sure that you get the answer and work hard at it. And finally, in terms of the teacher aspect, so again, we said you have to have patience, and you as a teacher have to make yourself available so that the students are going to feel comfortable with you, because if they are not comfortable with you, they're not going to be able to learn. If you're the type of person who becomes upset, they're going to either not want to ask you questions, or they're not even going to want to listen to anything you say, because generally when a person is learning, you like to learn from people who you respect and who you care about. And when someone who you are feeling that you don't respect, or you feel that they are not a nice person, you really have a tendency not to listen to anything they say. And just one final thing about, it's not exactly teaching, but it's the same idea, that we find that there are a lot of, even today, there are many of the poskim, many of the people who are knowledgeable halachic authorities. So they have time slots every day where you can call them and ask a shaila, you can ask a question. And when you call these people, they are going to give you the time that you need to answer the question, even though tons of people are calling them, and they are giving their time. They're saying, okay, I'm designating the time, even though I know people are asking, who knows, sometimes obviously the questions are very serious, and sometimes they're very simple questions. And they're able to have the patience to be able to deal with people every day, all the time. And that is something that we are looking to become, the type of person who, when someone asks us a question and it seems to be either it sounds like an easy, you should have known that, etc., we are able to answer them in a way that makes them feel that their question was a good question, that we are giving them time because we care about them, and that they have a value, and that they should therefore want to continue to ask so that they will be able to continue